Guys, this is Rio Murata, photographer based in Tokyo. This is like take 5 actually, so you guys probably been waiting for it. I have not been waiting for this moment, but I had to like make a video on it unfortunately. But if you guys shoot with a medium format camera, and if you're a YouTuber and if you like make videos related to film photography, you guys know that there's always that video where people talk about the Holga 120, and people who live in North America, people who live in Europe, I guess you guys already made that video, and I gradually felt the game is on, that when I have to stand up because I'm the only Japanese people, I'm the person who shoots with a medium format camera and speaks the English. I'm a whitewashed Asian, I know it, but I had to make a video of the Holga 120 sometime, and I guess this is that time to talk about how bad this camera is, but how cheaply made this camera is, and sort of like my overview of this camera, unfortunately. And the Holga 120 is, if you guys know, is a medium format camera made by a company called Holga by a guy named Lee Ding-mo back in 1982, which appeared back in, I think, in Hong Kong. And back in that day, due to the financial, economic things that were going on back in those days, where there weren't that many wealthy people and people only had little cash to spare, and due to that, restriction, there was sort of like this demand for a camera that was affordable. And not to mention that I think back in 1982 in Hong Kong, black and white film 120 rolls were widely available at a cheap price, and I guess that was actually the reason why this camera was introduced for people, for the working class people, to sort of like shoot with a camera back in that days. And because of the low cost construction of the Holga 120, and because it was made out of plastic, the first, I guess, version had a plastic lens, and which had a lot of epic greatness in the photography world: vignetting, distortion, pincushion distortion, and yeah, light leaks. Oh yeah. So yeah, I myself was able to grab a Holga 120 GN actually for 2,200 yen, which was $20. And to sum up the variants of the Holga 120, they had a letter after the 120. There's the 120N, SF, FN, CFN, which basically uses a plastic lens, while the GN uses a glass lens. And there were other variants such as having a flash incorporated into the system, sort of like a Kodak's FunSaver, Utsurum this from Fujifilm. However, this is sort of like a medium format version of that. And in the meantime, I had time to shoot with this camera around sort of like my neighborhood, and also during the sort of like the New Year's where I went to Hatsumode. And after that, after shooting with Portra 400 on the first run, I basically shot with Gold 200 on the second run around the Shibasaki area, which I typically like shoot around. And on the first run, the Portra 400, interesting, because I heard that there were so many light leaks going in, I basically learned from grainy days of sealing the, what you call the Holga 120. I sealed it with sort of like a gaff tape actually, and wanted to see how much light leaks into the camera. And on the second run, when I used the Gold 200, I basically took off the tape to see if there was any difference. shooting, there were a lot of things I realized. One big mistake that I made, this Holga 120 GN that I purchased, and this is sort of like happens in all the Holga cameras, is that the Holga 120 is completely similar to the, I used it once, Zenza Bronica RF645. If you guys don't know about it, that is a rangefinder camera made by Zenza Bronica. That is basically the smallest rangefinder, if I'm right, for the medium format made by Zenza Bronica. And that camera has a unique function where when you shoot horizontally, the image that you get after post-process comes out vertically. It becomes reverse. And when I shot with the Zenza Bronica just once actually, I never knew about it, but because of the frame was like on the opposite side, I knew that my image would come the opposite. But the Holga 120, I never knew about it, but it came out the reverse, same as the Zenza Bronica. But the field of view is like horizontal, so I anticipated that the frames would cut horizontal, but it came out vertically, so all my photos came out vertically, unfortunately. And I should have knew that, I should have done my research, but I forgot about that. But this might be a deciding factor for some, because that, which means that if you want to shoot landscape orientation, you basically have to tilt the camera upward to get landscape. So if it becomes vertical, I guess it would suit more like portrait type of work, because a lot of portraits are shot in vertical orientation. But yeah, that's something I realized from a mistake. So, and another thing that I realized is that this camera is similar to Utsurun's Kodak FunSaver, which the camera itself already has a fixed shutter speed and fixed aperture, meaning that depending on what kind of film stock you use, you can basically overexpose if you want. But I realized that when I press the shutter, typically when you shoot at shutter speed at 1/100th of a second, you typically don't get camera shake or something. But for my unit that I purchased, there were some kind of blurring going on. I don't know if it was the shutter slap or something like that, which basically like sort of blurs out the final image. But some of the images were sharp while some images were not sharp. I don't know what happened, but it became sort of like iffy, and some shots look really nice, while other shots, I don't know what I shot. So that's like another thing that I realized after shooting with this camera. And for the light leaks, this was like surprising, because this, like, I guess this because it's made out of plastic, it means that it can be it can be mass produced, which means that I guess typically when you mass produce something, the qualities differ depending on type, product A and product B, although they were the exact same model. Mine in particular did not have that much light leaks going on, unfortunately, and I thought there would be some kind of light leaks going on, but I couldn't notice it at all, unfortunately. So if you're going after light leaks and stuff like that, I guess you need to purchase multiple units and test them out to see like if this one has light leaks while this one doesn't. Mine in particular, when I took off the gaff tape, it did not light leak as much as I anticipated, unfortunately. So, but there were a lot of like pincushion distortion, there were a lot of vignetting, and there were a lot of what you call flaring going on. So if that's like the type of photos you are going after, this might be a great unit. And at the same time, what's interesting about this camera is when it does really well, it does really well. Well, sometimes it's like a complete blunder. You don't know, you know, the effects of what the type of shot you took, and you might get a blurred shot. But at the same time, if it's something you're looking after, or if it's the type of art you're going to want to produce in the long run, this might be a great camera to use. And all in all, my favorite shot is this sort of like train that was like overpassing and basically shot through a sort of like a gate or something. And you guys can tell the pincushion distortion, but the flaring and the light and the color, I just like this shot, unfortunately. And if I'm right, the Shibasaki area is where the Keio line, the Keio train, basically travels from downtown Tokyo to all the way to Mount Takawa, actually. And they sometimes do a photo contest. So if that photo contest happens this year or maybe next year, I don't know, but I'm gonna try to apply with this photo to see if it wins anything.
I know it's not sharp at all. It's like really blurry, but I'm curious because 99.9% of photo contests in Japan are shot on digital, and it would be interesting if I'm like the only guy who shoots with film, and if I can win that tournament. So photo contest, if I have the time, I need to get it printed out and like send it there. So went out a little bit off topic, but all in all, I really enjoyed shooting with this camera, and I guess it's a camera that most photographers would hate on a digital. It has like distortion, it has flaring, it has like ghosting, it has blurring, vignetting, and you name it all, but a la carte. But so yeah, I really enjoy shooting with this camera, and not to mention, like I keep saying this over and over again, but this camera is made out of plastic, meaning that this camera is probably going to be the lightest camera for the medium format, period. And I know lightness, and people like, it's sort of like a toss-up. Like if you get a lighter camera, you might get a crappier like construction build, but if it's heavier, you get like more durability, more reliability, like a Pentax 67. I'm not sure if I never used it, but it might be durable in my opinion. But it's like a toss-up. So if you're like casually shooting, this camera's really good to use. If not, using sort of like more like a medium format camera that with higher durability, higher, I guess, flexibility, because you can't, and I forgot to mention that this camera is like sort of like pan focus, so because f-stops are like limited, you have a lot more constraints with this camera, but you can learn so much with it. I mean, because of the limitations that you have, I mean, making art is going to be hard, but I guess it might be worth it for some. So yeah. So yeah, my Holga 120 video ends here, unfortunately. So if I'm like curious about people who actually shoot with Holga 120. I mean, how does your copy differ from mine? Like mine doesn't have any light leaks and stuff like that. Or if you're like thinking of like purchasing this camera, like what are you looking for? Or are you just looking for the fun of it, or more like are you like really serious about shooting with this camera? I don't know. So yeah, please leave in the comments below. Happy to reply. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy this video. We'll see you next time. Peace out.